The ocean was quiet. Too quiet. The Abyss Explorer drifted through the endless expanse of the Bermuda Triangle, its instruments sweeping the ocean floor in silent vigilance. The research team had been at sea for weeks, scanning for anomalies, mapping unseen depths. The sonar operator leaned over his screen, watching the familiar lines and static formations flicker across the monitor. Then, something changed. A new shape appeared, faint at first, a shadow against the abyss. The operator frowned, adjusting the sensitivity. The image sharpened. His breath caught in his throat. It wasn't a sunken ship. It wasn't a coral formation. It was something else. It was too large, too precise. Geometric. He called for the lead scientist, his voice steady but tight with unease. The team gathered around the screen, watching as the sonar traced the object's outline. It wasn't an error. The deeper the scan went, the more the image solidified. A structure, massive, rigid, and buried beneath thousands of feet of water. For a long moment, no one spoke. The lead scientist finally broke the silence, his voice barely above a whisper. "This shouldn't be here." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Structures didn't exist at these depths, not natural ones. There were no known settlements, no lost ships, no geological formations that looked like this. But the scan was undeniable. The shape was real. The team recalibrated the sonar, scanning from multiple angles. The data remained consistent. The structure stretched over 100 meters wide, its edges eerily perfect, as though carved with intent. No signs of damage, no decay, just smooth, unnatural precision. Then the readings changed. The object moved. The shift was slight, so small that at first they thought it was interference. But the operator ran the scan again. A few degrees, a tilt. Something deep beneath them had adjusted, responding to their presence. The scientist stiffened. That's not possible. The ocean was supposed to be still at this depth. No current strong enough to shift a rock of that size. No tectonic activity that could explain the sudden change. And yet, the sonar pinged again. Another shift, then another. The lead scientist clenched his jaw. Send the probe down. The submersible drone, designed for deep-sea exploration, was prepped within minutes. It was a small, unmanned vehicle, equipped with high-resolution cameras and a reinforced light, capable of withstanding the crushing pressure of the deep. As it descended, the ship's crew gathered around the monitors, watching as the feed flickered to life. At first, there was nothing but darkness. Then, as the floodlight activated, the ocean floor came into view. The drone's camera panned across a barren expanse of sand and jagged rock, the kind of desolate terrain expected at these depths. And then, it appeared. The structure loomed in the distance, rising from the seabed like something from another world. The floodlight cast long, eerie shadows across its surface, revealing patterns that shouldn't exist. There were markings, symbols, something etched into the surface, something deliberate. The lead scientist leaned closer to the screen, his fingers tightening on the console. Enhance that image. The operator adjusted the focus. The markings weren't random. They followed a pattern, an intricate design carved with precision. Not eroded by time, not claimed by the ocean. They looked preserved. The ship's captain, a man who had spent his entire life at sea, exhaled sharply. "I don't like this." No one did. The drone drifted closer, its camera capturing the scale of the structure. It wasn't just a single formation. It extended beyond the light's reach, its edges vanishing into the abyss. Then, a movement. Something in the darkness shifted. A faint ripple just beyond the camera's range. The team watched in silence, tension thick in the air. The drone's sensors picked up a sudden change in pressure, an anomaly in the currents. The sonar operator swallowed hard. Something's down there. Another shift. Not from the structure. This time, from the surrounding waters. Something was moving. The lead scientist straightened, his voice sharp. Pull the drone back. The operator hesitated. The camera feed flickered. For a fraction of a second, something massive passed in front of the light. Just a silhouette, a distortion in the water. Too fast, too large. And then, the feed cut to static. The screen went dark. The sonar fell silent. The research team stared at the blank monitors, the hum of the ship's engines suddenly deafening. No one spoke. No one moved. The drone was gone. The scientist exhaled, his breath unsteady. We're not alone down here. The research vessel Abyss Explorer floated in uneasy silence. The drone was gone. The sonar had gone dark. The ocean stretched endlessly in all directions, still and impenetrable. But the team wasn't just staring into an empty sea. They were in the Bermuda Triangle, and history had already written this place's fate. For centuries, this stretch of ocean had swallowed ships, planes, entire crews without a trace. The stories dated back to the first explorers who dared to cross these waters, and they had only grown more terrifying with time. In 1918, the USS Cyclops vanished with 309 men aboard. No distress call, no wreckage, just gone. In 1945, Flight 19, 5 U.S. Navy bombers, radioed back to base, their pilots confused, their compasses spinning wildly. They reported strange readings, an eerie glow in the clouds, and then, one by one, they fell silent. Rescue teams were sent immediately. They never returned. Theories emerged, desperate attempts to explain the unexplainable. Some blamed rogue waves, capable of swallowing ships whole in an instant. Others pointed to methane gas eruptions, rising from the ocean floor and disrupting buoyancy, dragging vessels into the abyss before they had time to react. But some weren't convinced. Because for all the rational explanations, there were too many missing pieces, too many disappearances that defied logic. Pilots reported seeing glowing whirlpools spiraling into the depths. Electronic systems failed without warning. Radio transmissions were sometimes found, but the voices on the other end weren't always human. And then there were the clouds. In 2018, NASA satellites picked up something strange, hexagonal cloud formations over the Bermuda Triangle. Meteorologists claimed these clouds could create microbursts, pockets of extreme wind capable of forcing aircraft into the sea. But the problem wasn't just their shape, it was the way they moved, because they weren't drifting. They were shifting, rotating in unnatural geometric patterns, like something below was controlling them. The lead scientist of the Abyss Explorer had studied these reports before. He had dismissed them until now, because what they had just found on the ocean floor, hidden beneath the Bermuda Triangle, wasn't an anomaly. It was a structure, a design, something made with intent. And if the triangle had been swallowing ships for centuries, had they just found out where everything went? He turned back to the sonar operator. Try the signal again. The operator hesitated, then flipped the switch. The sonar pulse sent out its call, bouncing off the ocean floor. It came back distorted, bent, warped, as if something in the deep wasn't just absorbing the sound, it was listening. And then, something answered. A low-frequency vibration, not from their ship, not from their equipment. Something from below. The scientist grabbed the console, his voice barely above a whisper. We're not alone down here. The sonar pulse faded into silence, but the vibration remained. A low, rhythmic hum that pulsed through the water like a heartbeat. The crew of the Abyss Explorer stood frozen, eyes locked on the distorted readings flickering across the screen. The lead scientist exhaled, steadying himself. There was only one way to find out what was really down there. They had to send a team. The Abyss Sentinel, an unmanned deep-sea probe, was designed for extreme depths. Its cameras could pierce the darkness, its sensors could scan for movement, and its reinforced hull could withstand pressures that would crush a human body in an instant. But even with its cutting-edge technology, it wasn't prepared for what waited below. The probe was lowered into the water, vanishing beneath the waves as its tether spooled out behind it. The ship's crew gathered around the monitor, watching the live feed as the probe descended through the deep. The first few hundred meters were uneventful, just endless blue fading into black. Then, at 2,000 meters, the water grew thick with sediment, swirling in slow-motion currents, reducing visibility to mere meters. At 3,500 meters, something changed. The water wasn't just dark anymore. It was empty, devoid of life. No fish, no deep-sea creatures, nothing. Just an abyss that seemed to stretch forever. The scientist whispered, "There should be something down here." At 4,200 meters, the first structures appeared. The probe's floodlights flickered over towering formations that jutted from the ocean floor, massive, angular, unnatural. The camera panned slowly, revealing intricate carvings along the surface. Symbols. Some looked like ancient inscriptions, worn with time but unmistakably deliberate. Others were sharper, more precise, as if they had been carved recently. The lead scientist's pulse quickened. Enhance that image. The screen sharpened. The symbols weren't just decorative. They were patterns, arranged in a way that suggested meaning. But before he could analyze them further, the probe's sensor alarms flared. Something was moving. Not in front of the probe. Beneath it. A deep, shifting shadow, larger than anything the crew had ever seen. The sonar picked up faint reverberations, slow, methodical, as if something massive was stirring from centuries of stillness. The scientist grabbed the radio. "Pull it back, now." The operator hesitated. We haven't finished the scan yet." "Now!" The tether began reeling the probe back up, the cameras still rolling, scanning the impossible structure. The crew watched in stunned silence. Whatever this was, it was not natural. And then, the screen glitched. For a split second, the camera feed flickered to static. And when the image returned, something had moved. The structure was no longer still. A section of its wall had shifted. Opened, like a door. Something inside had sensed the probe's presence, and it was waking up. The scientist's breath hitched. "Get that probe out of there, right now." The tether strained as the sentinel was pulled toward the surface. But then the sonar picked up a new reading. Something was following it. The last image the camera captured, just before the feed cut to static, was a massive, shifting silhouette rising from the darkness. Something alive, something watching. Then, silence. The probe was gone, and the research team was completely alone. The ship's deck was silent. No one spoke. The research team stared at the blank monitors where, just moments ago, they had been watching something beyond human comprehension. The probe was gone. Vanished. But the sonar, it was still picking up something. A presence. A slow, rhythmic pulse beneath them, deep in the ocean's black abyss. It wasn't interference. It wasn't an error. It was deliberate. And it meant only one thing. They weren't alone down there. The lead scientist turned back to the console, his mind racing. What had they just witnessed? A ruin, a machine, a living entity. No one had answers. But they had theories, and none of them were comforting. First theory: the lost civilization. For centuries, explorers have searched for Atlantis, the legendary lost city swallowed by the sea. Ancient texts spoke of a great civilization with technology beyond its time, an empire that thrived before mysteriously vanishing beneath the waves. Some believed it was a myth. Others whispered that it had never been lost, only hidden. Could the Bermuda Triangle be Atlantis's graveyard? Could this structure be all that remained of its people? The scientists studied the images they managed to recover before the feed was lost. The symbols, they resembled Minoan inscriptions, a script thousands of years old, yet untouched by time. If this was Atlantis, then it hadn't been destroyed. It had been waiting. But if an ancient city had survived for so long, the question wasn't just where it had gone. The question was, who or what still lived there? Second theory: a machine, waiting to be activated. Not everyone believed the structure was man-made. Some thought it wasn't a ruin, it was a machine. The seamless angles, the perfect symmetry, the way its walls moved on their own. It didn't resemble a crumbling city. It resembled something still active, still functioning. If it was mechanical, then who built it? A forgotten civilization, or something else? The sonar logs showed strange electromagnetic readings in the area, interference that didn't match any known natural phenomenon. A signal, a transmission. Something was trying to communicate. But was it sending a message, or waiting for one to be received? The scientists' hands tightened around the edge of the console. What if they had triggered something? And if the machine had been sleeping beneath the Bermuda Triangle for thousands of years, what had they just woken up? Third theory: the creature beneath the triangle. The sonar operator shifted uneasily. He wasn't convinced this was a lost city. He wasn't convinced it was a machine either. Because if the last image from the probe was real, then this wasn't a structure at all. It was something alive. The 1997 bloop recording, a mysterious underwater sound detected by deep-sea sensors, had never been explained. It wasn't seismic activity. It wasn't geological movement. It was a noise so large, so powerful, that whatever made it had to be bigger than a blue whale. What if it hadn't been a sound at all? What if it had been a heartbeat? The operator replayed the sonar scans, staring at the rhythmic pulse echoing from the deep. Not random, not chaotic, but steady, like breathing. The team exchanged glances, their minds grasping at explanations that refused to make sense. What if the Bermuda Triangle wasn't dangerous because of magnetic fields, or methane eruptions, or even lost cities? What if, for centuries, ships and planes hadn't been disappearing into the ocean? What if they had been taken? And now, something below was stirring, something aware. The scientist exhaled, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to leave." But it was already too late, because the pulse beneath them was getting stronger. Something was rising. The research team stood frozen. The sonar still pulsed, but the readings were becoming erratic. The rhythmic hum that had been echoing beneath them was no longer steady. It was increasing, growing stronger. The scientist grabbed the console, scanning for interference. The ship's instruments flickered, their readings corrupted by an unknown force. The low hum beneath them had turned into a resonance, vibrating through the hull of the Abyss Explorer, sending ripples across the dark waves. This wasn't a signal. This was a warning. The captain's voice cut through the tension. "We're pulling out! Now!" The crew scrambled into action. The engines roared to life, churning the water as the ship began to turn away from the coordinates where the probe had vanished. The captain's hands were tight on the controls, his jaw set. He had been at sea long enough to feel when something was wrong, and everything about this moment felt wrong. The sonar operator hesitated. He didn't want to keep looking, but he couldn't help himself. One last scan, one last reading before they left this place forever. The screen blinked. The ocean floor was no longer still. The shape that had appeared beneath them, the structure, the machine, the thing buried in the abyss. It was rising. The pulse grew deafening, rattling every loose bolt and plate on the ship. The scientist staggered back, his stomach twisting in a feeling he couldn't describe. It wasn't pressure. It wasn't fear. It was something worse. The kind of feeling that told a person to run, but also told them it wouldn't matter. The sonar pinged again. A massive distortion filled the screen. And then, the ship's power cut out. The world plunged into total darkness. For several long, suffocating seconds, there was nothing but the sound of their own breathing. The ship rocked, the deep rumble beneath them reverberating through the hull. Someone whispered a prayer. Someone else whispered something that sounded like a name. Then, a single flash of emergency power. And for one final moment, the screen came back online. The sonar showed one last reading. A shape. Enormous, no longer buried, no longer waiting. It was here. A shadow, stretching across the ocean floor, rising toward the surface. It had been sleeping, and they had just woken it up. The ship's alarms wailed. The captain shoved the throttle forward. The Abyss Explorer lurched into motion, tearing away from the coordinates as fast as it could go. The scientist stared at the screen, his mind racing, struggling to comprehend what he had just seen. The truth was unbearable. The Bermuda Triangle wasn't a trap. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't just another mystery of the sea. It was a grave, and something inside it was trying to break free. The ship raced toward open water, its crew shaken but alive. The captain didn't stop until they were miles from the site, until the readings faded, until the ocean was quiet again. But the silence no longer felt empty, because now they knew the truth. They had escaped, but something beneath the Bermuda Triangle was still there, still waiting, and now it knew they had seen it.